Ranger fans, this is your favorite YouTuber that still talks about Power Rangers, aka the Golden Green Ranger. Welcome back to the channel. And if this is your first time at the channel, well, hello, I'm the Golden Green Ranger. Why? Because I love Tommy as green and Jason as gold. Stay basic. Anyway, let's get into why you're here today, or at least why you were curious enough to click on this video. And that's my love for the season of Power Rangers, Lost Galaxy. Guys, remember that theme song? It was pretty lit, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, this is kind of the follow-up of In Space and the Power Rangers universe, because it kind of finished out a lot of stories that were started in Space. So a lot of people consider it a sequel series, even though it kind of started a new trend that Power Rangers would follow afterwards. And that's kind of what I want to get into today, is the fact that Lost Galaxy doesn't get the credit it deserves because it started a lot of trends that Power Rangers follows to this date. And I think that's very, very interesting that the show doesn't get credited for starting a lot of these trends. And the first one I've kind of hinted to earlier is just that. It has a whole new cast, a new cast of Rangers. See, prior to this, starting with Mighty Morphin, every time the show decided to refocus and change the powers, it was the same kids just getting new powers. They might change here and there, but it was never a complete cast change. You know, you had Jason, Trini, and Zach leave, but you had Tommy, Kimberly, and Billy staying. So it still felt like the familiar cast. Even with the biggest cast change in Turbo, with 4 of the originals leaving and getting replaced, you still had Justin staying there, so it felt almost familiar. Especially since TJ and the gang kind of just filled in the role of these Rangers. They really kind of picked up right where they left off. So the show felt very familiar. Sorry, words are difficult today. Anyway, or I guess a lot of times words are difficult. Point being, it was kind of interesting to see an entire new cast. And it was really interesting because we got to go in a direction that we never did before. And that was Rangers that were kind of unique and different. And what do I mean by that? You see, every time you set up a character and they go from season to season, you kind of write yourself into corners because Tommy can't act out of character. We know what Tommy's character is like. So he's got to remain consistent throughout the series. You can't really do new fun things with him, even if you really want to. And it kind of is, it's a difficult thing for the writers because they kind of write themselves in a box. But when you bring a whole new cast of characters in, you can do things that maybe you wanted to do before that you couldn't. Even when TJ and the gang joined, they kind of filled in the role of the original 4, so they kind of picked up similar tropes in their personality. It was obviously written for it to be the same teenagers all through Turbo, so they kind of felt the same. It wasn't until In Space where they kind of separated themselves and started becoming their own unique characters. But Lost Galaxy, on the other hand, completely threw that out the door and said, these are all brand new characters you're going to get to know and like. And this was done for a multitude of reasons. One, it was to keep the franchise fresh and unique. Two, of course, it's a lot cheaper to pay new actors than have returning actors that need raises and can negotiate for higher pay. So it was something that probably helped keep the series on for as long as it has been, when you can keep cost reductions down, especially by underpaying your actors, unfortunately. But I'm not here to talk about the analytics of how much money Power Rangers makes. I'm here to talk about Lost Galaxy. You see, In Space, which was meant to be the last season, did so well financially between the viewership and toy sales. I mean, even I had all 6 of the Rangers In Space action figures. It did so well that, of course, they had lightning in a bottle. They weren't going to cancel the show now, even though In Space was meant to be the end. And you can tell it was meant to be the end. Right? The Countdown to Destruction ending felt like an end not only to In Space, but the entire Ranger series. Evil was defeated. The Rangers lost their power. That's the end. But when you're making money, what are you going to do? You're going to give up? No, you're going to figure out what to do. So the idea was, let's do another In Space series. This time, we'll set it in a Lost Galaxy. Granted, at the end of the show's run, but that's not the point. Point being, they did another In Space series. It wasn't meant to be an in-space series based off of the Sentai footage they used, but they did a workaround with that. They set it on this Terra Venture, which was kind of this habitat in space for humans that were trying to colonize other planets. And it was interesting because Terra Venture had different environments throughout. So it was an easy way to explain why the Rangers were all of a sudden fighting in the desert or fighting in the jungle. It's actually smart writing, to be honest. But also, we're not here to address that. We're here to talk about the changes that the show put in place. And one of them, we even talked about earlier, was the cast change. But another important thing that the show did was it was the first time with this new cast that the Rangers didn't start off as friends. Every Ranger on this team barely knew each other. The closest being Kai and Kendricks, just because they worked together, which really didn't establish them as friends. They were more co-workers. I get along with my co-workers, but it doesn't mean that we're all friends. And it was interesting because it got to do a new dynamic that the show had never done before, and that was Rangers getting to know each other, learning to work together as a team. And it was the first time you've seen a Blue Ranger like I challenging the Red Ranger, saying, I don't know if I agree with your leadership. I don't know if I agree with what you're doing. And it was an interesting dynamic. You would have never seen Billy do that to Jason, or Rocky do that to Tommy, or Justin do that to TJ. That's hilarious to think about Justin doing that to TJ. I apologize. Point being, you would have never saw that dynamic before. But since they weren't friends to begin with and they were getting to know each other, it was a good way to see a difference in the team. That they're not all going to agree. They're not all going to see eye to eye. And I really like that concept. I think it was an interesting idea. And because it was a brand new team, we got to do things like we've never done before. Like the show, averting expectations, with Mike being the one to pull out the Qzar saver. Go ahead and correct me in the comments. It's been a minute since I watched the show. Only for him to be essentially killed off and hand the sword to Leo, his little brother, who wasn't even meant to be there, and him becoming the defunct leader of that season, the Red Ranger, with the Lion Zord. And it's a very interesting concept to see, because it was the first time you weren't sure if he was meant to be the Red Ranger, if he was meant to be the leader. Leo obviously did a great job, but he also questioned himself constantly, even to the point when Mike was shown to be alive, trying to return the saber to him, saying, this belongs to you, and Mike saying, I might have pulled the saber out, but you've done a great job. You're meant to be the Red Ranger. And I always think that's an interesting concept. But I hear you say, what else did the show do? You've talked about that in the past, Jesse. You talked about the cast change before. What else did the show? Give me something new. And I hear you. Well, has anybody ever sat and thought that Lost Galaxy was actually the first time we had an official Power Rangers crossover? This was before the MCU. This was before the DCEU. This was like a crossover you hadn't seen since Universal Monster movies. It was two Ranger teams teaming up. Something that they couldn't do in the past because each team was Rangers just getting new powers. And they can't team up with themselves. But since you had 5 new Rangers, you got a whole team of Rangers teaming up with another team of Rangers, 5. Especially a beloved season like In Space. Who didn't love In Space? And it was a brilliant idea bringing the Psycho Rangers back to be the one that the teams have to team up to take down. Because, be honest, the Psycho Rangers were probably the biggest challenge that In Space Rangers ever faced. So, of course, they need to come back to take them on again. They'd done it before, and it was a genius idea. It was great writing. It was a great episode, to be honest. I still remember my heart beating when I seen the In Space Rangers returning, getting so excited, wondering if this was going to be full-time. Were we going to get 10 Rangers this season? But no, it was just an episode. And that was enough, because it was one of the most brilliant episodes Power Rangers history. A trend that we often follow to this day. Something we almost expect constantly of 2 teams teaming up. And it's those moments that keep you hyped and excited as a franchise. Seeing the new Rangers teaming up with former Rangers. Seeing them interact It's such a neat concept. And it's something we've come to expect now that was started with Lost Galaxy. And while we're on the subject of that team up, I said it's one episode, but it's actually a two-parter. And it's something that kind of changed the Rangers format forever in that second two-parter. And that was watching a Ranger actually die. And I don't mean off screen. I don't mean like she faded away. I mean, we watched a Ranger give her life to save the team and understand that, wow, these are kids. These are individuals that are just human underneath that helmet. They're vulnerable. And I remember as a kid thinking nothing was going to happen to Kendricks. Nothing ever bad happens to the Power Rangers. Only for the camera to pull back and see her floating as a ghost. And thinking to myself, holy shit, this just got real. I remember telling that to my brother, who had stopped watching Power Rangers at the time, and my brother saying, no way, they didn't kill a Ranger off. And I said, yeah, that's what the show did. And it's something we take for granted now because there's been dark episodes before. We've seen Rangers in the future be killed off again. We've seen Rangers lose their parents. We've had other dark episodes. But this was the one that started the trend. As much fear as we felt when Divatox invaded the command center, it was nothing compared to knowing a Ranger could die. And that's something I just can't forget. It was such a changing moment in the franchise. It was a brave and smart, bold move. And I have to say, the writers had balls to do that. How they got away with it, I don't know. But I always appreciate it. And a lot of people say it was underdone by Kendricks returning at the end of Lost Galaxy. But at the end of the day, she still was killed off for the remainder of the season. And it's something I can never forget. Especially since people really generally liked Kendricks. I mean, she was brainy, she was smart, she was pretty, she was a great Pink Ranger. So to see her actually die, being a hero, was something that run true. That was, wow, this is serious. And it's something I always appreciate with Power Rangers. But that's just the rambling of a madman. I just want to say I really appreciate Lost Galaxy. And I know people often joke around and call it the Charlie Brown season or, In Space 2, the space opera. I get it. But if it's a season you haven't watched or haven't watched in a while, I definitely recommend at least giving it a chance. Because you might find more appreciative things in it than you didn't realize. Appreciative things in it? You might appreciate it more. Maybe that's what I meant to say. Either way, thanks as always for watching. I appreciate you guys. Like, share, subscribe, or don't. That's your business. I can't tell you how to live. But what I can tell you to do is to let the power protect you. Is this still recording? Oh, it is. Okay. Hey, you.